Sometimes I think we're all your children.
Hello, and welcome to my review of Timbuktu. I am your host, Graham Norton's rubbish old manager, long dead, sad face, and I'll be diving into Doctor Who Season 2. Series 15, Season 41. Man, what a crazy show. Last series had all the right ingredients, but the recipe was missing. Some weak scripts and a disappointing story arc. But can this series do better? Let's start the ranking and find out, from best to worst, and beware, spoilers ahead. Number 8, The Well. Very back to basics Doctor Who. A spooky, atmospheric base under siege and a horrifying monster with lots of gravitas. And excellent actors, Rose Ayling-Ellis in particular being the show stealer. I like that even though it's a sequel, it manages to showcase its own identity. It's the same villainous creature and setting, but they're presented differently, suggesting lots of developments since Midnight. Love the quick, shadowy glimpses of the creature, subtle and unnerving. Great directing from Amanda Brocci. This also has my favourite 15th Doctor moment. Ncuti staring down the creature's aura, horrified and vulnerable, to suddenly taking control of the situation, finally getting an edge on this thing that's hurt him and so many others, with a smile and a spring in his step. It's just so fundamentally heroic and Doctor. My only problems are little nitpicks such as the close-ups of people's screens looking a little bit goofy. There's also the unnecessary flashback narration for Shyla's childhood. Yeah, would have been more impactful without that. And of course, there's the tiresome Mrs. Flood cameo. But as a whole, The Well is very effective in what it sets out to do. Captivate, horrify and compel. Very good. 8 out of 10. Number 7. The Interstellar Song Contest. Yes, the visuals and fan service are on point. But additionally, it's also a very bold and at times moving story. I love the premise. Eurovision meets Die Hard, but in space. A great balance of tones, moving from campy fun to action-packed thrills. Memorable side characters too, such as Mike, Gary and Cora. I particularly like Kid and Wynne playing their parts as hurt rather than falling into the trap of hamming it up. There is also an intriguing situation for Ncuti's Doctor. He is usually so empathetic, but he hasn't had the chance to know this villain's species or backstory, unlike Belinda. So without that empathy, all he sees is red, and he needed help from a friend to snap him out of it in the forms of Susan and Belinda. Reminds me very much of the ending for The Runaway Bride. Chilling performance from Ncuti, and a sympathetically fearful one from Varada. Fun, ambitious, and completely bonkers. 8 out of 10. Number 6. The Story and the Engine. Very well conceived, performed with great atmosphere and passion. I love the setting and what this culture means to the Doctor. We get just enough of it before being flung into the self-contained barbershop. However, it is filled with too much high-concept exposition and doesn't utilise its visual storytelling quite well enough, at least at certain points. The animation, for example, on the window is great. Why couldn't this have been used for explaining the barber's backstory and plot, rather than just talking? They monologue so much to the point where I just felt overwhelmed. It's perhaps a bit too convoluted to be accessible. Plot points just flew over my head. It needed more clarity in its direction. Great performances from the main supporting cast. Shame the barber's customers are a little too sidelined to make an impression. And also a lovely cameo from Joe Martin. Although, how can Ncuti's Doctor remember Abby when he has no memory of his time being the fugitive Doctor? Bit of a plot hole there. Nevertheless, a fascinating story filled with cultural depth, if a bit muddled in execution. 7 out of 10. Number 5, Lux. Ah, so close! It had a brilliant atmosphere, structure, characters, performances and animation. Mr. Ring-a-Ding was a brilliantly realised creation. Well done, animation team. Just so good. And then the fans appeared. Oh, what was an inspired episode, now hugely eclipsed by a jarring and over-exaggerated satire on fandom. I really dislike how they belittle themselves, repeatedly saying lines like, "they don't matter," and "they're annoying," "they're types of characters without surnames." Aren't these guys meant to represent us? Because I get the impression from this that Doctor Who fans are people to be pitied. I don't believe in that. Doctor Who fans can be charismatic and smart people. Additionally, these fan stereotypes stop the plot dead in its tracks. They say or do nothing relevant. Anything important about the plot that they mention is immediately explained by Mr. Ring-a-Ding in the next scene. You could have cut this out and nothing would have changed. I would have replaced the scene with more meta, movie-related escape sequences. You know, let's get all Land of Fiction in the Mind Robber and have all these strange characters everywhere. Maybe Mr. Ring-a-Ding mixes film prints to ensure their capture. Suddenly, the Doctor and Belinda are faced with old Western cowboys, 1930s Dracula, or Steamboat Willie. It would be much more in keeping with the themes and environments of old cinema that this episode was exploring, rather than just randomly cutting to modern-day television in a living room. Look, where did that come from? I thought this was about cinema. Sadly, just one scene was enough to drag it down. It was all I could think of afterwards, despite everything else working out so uniquely well. Such a shame. 6 out of 10. Number 4, The Robot Revolution. Fun, but messy. This creative yet overly convoluted plot tries to fit too much in too little time. The story moves as fast as possible to get started, establish plot points, then stops, and suddenly wraps up after a sloppy climax. With an overly petty and tacked-on villain, super obvious plot twist, and haphazard side characters, it all feels cheap. The best example being Sasha being established as a close friend to the Doctor, then immediately, in the next shot, being killed off. I felt nothing for this, and yet the episode expects me to feel something. However, Varada Sethu as Belinda shines. She's feisty, compassionate, and impulsively brave. The robots and their world are excellently realised too, striking a good balance between imposing and humorous. It has enjoyably clever ideas and effective uses of comedy and drama, it's just all hastily thrown together with no time to breathe or flesh anything out. Average. 5 out of 10. Number 3, Lucky Day. It's a great idea for a Doctor Light story, for sure, with a very interesting plot twist. However, it's let down by the characters. I don't buy Ruby being so publicly open about her travels. I think it's an odd invasion of privacy on hers and the Doctor's behalf. Conrad seems too much like an arsehole. I like his motive of exposing units, quote, lies, but it's left vague whether he genuinely thinks he's helping people against a false government, in denial about aliens, wants attention, or is just out to cause trouble. I much prefer the more sympathetic angle of trying to help people see the truth, but I don't think that's what they were going for. They play him too much like a villain. I tell you who is definitely played like a villain, Kate Stewart. I absolutely hate her in this episode. She's clearly unstable, putting people's lives at risk just to prove a point, and once again, being bland, living in the Brigadier's shadow. Can you imagine the Brigadier having a psychotic episode like this and putting others in harm's way? Military personnel, especially in high positions, are trained to withstand high stress levels. I also think the Doctor was out of line here. Telling Conrad how and when he'll die is beyond sick, especially considering Conrad was defeated by this point. There was nothing to gain. He just messed up a man's psyche for nothing. Unlike the deeper cut of kids' actions in Interstellar Song Contest, I don't believe this is enough to drive the Doctor over the edge. All in all, an interesting core idea, but everything else seems bland and disturbingly off. 4 out of 10. Number 2, The Reality War. Cluttered, cluttered, cluttered. Far too much going on, and far too elaborate, filled with disappointment after disappointment. Omega, one of the most tragic and empathetic villains in Doctor Who history, reduced to a giant CGI snarling monster with an inaccurate backstory. Horrible decision. The Doctor immediately using a gun to beat him, despite the sonic screwdriver being redesigned to not resemble a gun. The Rani being a bland exposition machine and also easily discarded with. Loose plot threads never being acknowledged. What about Rogue? What about Susan? Nice to see you, Jodie. Why are you here? It's like a child getting carried away at playtime. Too many cool toys, not enough time for all to shine, making up the action as they go along and discarding any that they're bored with. I'm looking at you, Susan. The characters and stories are too much to balance, resulting in them being dry and interchangeable. While I like the sentiments surrounding Poppy, save the baby and all that heroic jazz, the way 15 and Belle suddenly behave as her actual parents is kinda weird. They don't have a real connection to this child that has been forced upon them, and they never have a romantic or life partner connection either. The fact that this episode assumes I'm emotionally invested in Poppy seemed just as forced upon me as it does to 15 and Belle. My immediate reaction was to reject it. I don't like being told what to feel. I much prefer deciding for myself, thank you very much. I feel a bit cheated that this is how the 15th Doctor ends, out of left field with so much left undone, yet we're seemingly meant to celebrate and cry like he's been here for many years. There's a sense it's all unearned. Aside from good performances, the talent itself is wasted on a messy drama too baffling to be tangible. Ncuti, the team, and the fandom deserved better than this. 3 out of 10. A very weak 3, I might add. And number 1, Wishworld. At least in the reality war, things happened. Messy, crazy, nonsensical things, but still things happened. Here, absolutely nothing happens. I don't like this plot for the Rani. She's all about science experiments, equations, laws of physics, not make-a-wish magic. Why the hell are there 2 Ranis? How is that significant to the story? Why is one weirdly sidelined to the point where she doesn't even feel like the Rani? I feel so bad for Anita Dobson. All this build-up around her for another actor to swoop in and take her role. So unjust. Her scene as the policewoman is very Rani, commanding and devil-may-care. She could have shined as this character. Archie Panjabi does a decent Kate O'Mara impression, but in all seriousness, great voice and delivery, but she doesn't quite make the role her own. The Rani here is played too much like the Master. Wide-eyed craziness, zany exposition, the out-of-nowhere backstory with the Doctor. Lover? What? There was nothing ever suggesting they were that close before. This is a very generalised depiction of the character. I'm also disappointed how the pantheon of gods, built up for 2 years, has suddenly just been dropped, reduced as a plot device for creating the Wishworld and paving the way for Time Lord villains who had no direct build-up or substantial screen time in this whole series leading up to this. Why is the God of Wishes a mortal baby? The hell is Rogue doing there? An Omega? What? Where did that come from? Apart from some mildly interesting ideas for Conrad's world, such as the old-fashioned aesthetic and politics, this doesn't even feel like a real episode. We know the world is fake. We know things will conveniently snap back together. Stop wasting our time. Who knew you could write 45 minutes of TV and have nothing happen? It's too mismatched, strange, convoluted, and far too loosely thrown together to be the slightest bit entertaining. It's awful. 2 out of 10. In conclusion, this series can be summed up as cluttered, convoluted, and confused. What started as a good coherent arc quickly loses control, descending into a load of obnoxious noise. It's like when you start that long car journey filled with excitement for your destination, only to be plagued by traffic, misdirections, road rage, and a child passenger growing increasingly bored, making loud cries. The best example of how this series fell apart is through Belinda. She starts as a great character, interesting and endearing, steering the way for a couple of unique episodes, but quickly sidelined from the action and forcibly rewritten as a single mother without her consent. All in favour of a load of other random characters and story beats that don't involve her. Such a shame. I really liked Belinda. The series just really dropped the ball on her and forcibly turned her into something she's not. Poor Belinda, poor season 2. And if I had to sum up the 15th Doctor's era with one word, unfulfilling. Far too much left undone. Everything possible being jammed in until all meaning is lost. I honestly can't think of another season in this show's history that lost the plot so badly. This series had a great Doctor, and also a great companion, a fascinating backstory for her, a very interesting story arc with the Vindicator and getting her home, and also it led for some great episodes such as the Well story in the Engine and Interstellar Song Contest. It's just such a shame that everything got dropped. Where it headed immediately diminished what came before. My main takeaway is that maybe Doctor Who needs a clean slate. Someone new that sees the show not for what it was or is, but what it can be. Let's bring in the new rather than over-relying on fan service over a satisfying story. I wish I could be more positive, but I can't. Doctor Who is in trouble. All we can do now is pray that Bad Wolf Studios learn from the many failures in this era. Just tell a good story. And on a last note, goodbye, Ncuti. You were a great Doctor. We're sorry it had to end like this. Also, what the f***